Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. So today we are here with another topic, and here from this lecture we are starting the series for the biochemistry lectures, and here we will study some basics and which are very beneficial for you, for the students of the biochemistry, as well as if the biochemistry in their minors, so it is going to definitely help them out. So let's begin. So today we are going to cover our first basic topic, that is the cell as well as its organelles. So let's explore. Here on the screen we are seeing this bluish diagram which represents the cell, and here is the boundary which is known as the cell membrane, and here we are seeing the bluish ocean, or that is known as the cytoplasm, which is the liquid which provides the fluidity to several organelles, such as here we can see the mitochondria, the endoplasmic reticulum. Here we can see the major organelle, that is the nucleus, and here is the yellowish part which is the subnucleus part, that is known as the nucleus, and several other organelles are present. So let's begin. Now here on this slide we see the several parts of the living organism, as well as some subcellular parts. So here from start this point, here is the atom which joins to form the molecule, and molecules which combine into the macromolecule like proteins, and these build organelles, the tiny machines lies inside the cells, and which we know that cell is the basic structural and functional unit of a living organism. And here we can see the similar cells whenever it joins together to forms the tissues, and which forms the organs such as the stomach, and here we can see the organs work together in organ system, and all system together make up an organism such as the human being. So now let's see what is biochemistry. Biochemistry is basically the branch of science that studies the chemical processes and substances that occur within the living organism. So here we can see that biochemistry is basically the branch of science that studies whatever the chemical processes takes place in the living organism. It focuses on the structure, the function, as well as the interaction of the biomolecules, such as the protein, nucleic acids, we have the DNAs and RNAs, carbohydrates and lipids, which are essential for the life. The interaction between the cells and their surrounding fluids also belongs to the biochemistry. It examines the important chemical processes occurring within the living organism at the molecular level. As a subdivision of both biology as well as the chemistry, biochemistry has evolved into a comprehensive field that illuminates how living things are made up of, how they function, as well as what chemicals they contain. Here we have some branches of biochemistry, such as the structural biochemistry. The name suggests it belongs to the structure, focuses on the molecular structure of biological macromolecules such as the proteins, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, lipids. Another branch is the enzymology, which basically studies the enzymes, their kinetics, the structures, as well as their functions. Another branch is the metabolic biochemistry that examines the metabolic pathways and their regulations, such as the glycolysis, the TCA cycle, etc. Another branch is the molecular biology that deals with the molecular mechanisms of genetic information flow. Now here this slide shows the scope and importance of the biochemistry, such as the molecular understanding of life, so it helps out in it. Biochemistry provides insights into the molecular basis of life by studying the biomolecules such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and the nucleic acids. Another scope and importance lies in the medical application that plays a crucial role in understanding diseases, their diagnosis, and the treatment by elucidating metabolic pathways and genetic expressions. Now, the biotechnology and genetic engineering, biochemistry is fundamental in advancements like recombinant DNA technology, monoclonal antibody production, and the gene therapy. Next is the agricultural science that aids in improving crop yield, pest control, and understanding plant metabolism. Now, this slide shows the basic structural and functional unit of life, that is the cell, which is the basic unit of life, and cell discovered by the Robert Hooke. The word cell comes from the Latin word which is the cellula, that meaning a small room. A typical cell size is 10 micrometer and a typical cell mass is 1 nanogram. The cell is the basic structural as well as the functional unit of all living organisms. Cell can be broadly classified into prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells lack a true nucleus and the membrane-bound organelles, such as the bacteria, cyanobacteria, etc. Eukaryotic cells have a well-defined nucleus and membrane-bound organelles, such as the plant and animal cells. Now let's see the historical background of the cell. In 1665, Robert Hooke first observed dead cock cells under a microscope and coined the term cell. Now the cell theory. It is a fundamental principle that explains the structure and function of all living organisms in terms of cells. It was observed by the German scientist who made major contribution in the cell theory. Now let's see some contributors of the cell theory. So firstly, the name arises is the Matthew Schleiden in 1838 proposed that all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. Another contributor is the Theodor Schwann. In 1839, he proposed that cell is the basic structural and the functional unit of life. Then the Rudolf Virchow in 1855 added the idea that omnis cellula acellula, which means all cells come from pre-existing cells. Now, why it's important? Cell theory unifies biology by explaining how all living things share a common structure. It provides the basis for modern fields such as microbiology, genetics, and molecular biology. Now let's see some parts of the cell which is known as the organelles of the cell. Here we can see, start from the top, here is the membrane that is known as the cell membrane, which is the circular in shape. And here we can see the greenish one is the Golgi complex. And here we can see on the cell membrane there are some tiny proteins are present that is known as the membrane receptors, and we can observe it all over the membrane. And here we can see the powerhouse of the cell that is known as the mitochondria. And here we can see the huge organelle of the cell, that is the nucleus, that contains the DNA, and in it a darker in shade the subnuclear part that is known as the nucleus, and with it we can see the ER region, endoplasmic reticulum region is present, and several other organelles are also the part of the cell. So now let's start with the cytoplasm. Cell material outside the nucleus but within the cell membrane. So we have seen the cell that contains the cell membrane, and here we can see the nucleus, and several other organelles are present in the cell. So here we can see the liquid or the fluid is present around the organelles, and that are bounded with the cell membrane. So that liquid or that fluid is known as the cytoplasm. It is basically a clear and thick fluid that contains structures called organelles. Now here we can see the organelles and their functions. So the plasma membrane, also known as the cell membrane, its structure is consists on the phospholipid bilayer with embedded proteins, and its function regulates the movement of substances in and out of the cell, provides protection, it facilitates the cell communication. All cell communication, the protection, what going in and what going out from the cell, all things are regulated by the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. So here we can see the nucleus. Another organelle is the nucleus. Its structure enclosed by a nuclear envelope containing nuclear pores. It contains also the nucleoplasm, that is the fluid basically lies under the nucleus. That fluid is known as the nucleoplasm, and also contains the genetic information known as the chromatin, and the nucleolus part is also present there. Its function: houses genetic material or the DNA, controls cellular activities, as well as the site for the RNA synthesis. Now the nucleus, large oval body near the center of the cell, and the control center for all activities. It's surrounded by a nuclear membrane. Also contain the nucleoplasm is the protoplasm in the nucleus that contains the genetic material like chromosome, the DNA. Another subpart of the nucleus is the nucleolus, that is found in the nucleus, that contains more genetic information such as the RNA. Another part is the cell membrane, the outer boundary of the cell. It separates the cell from other cells. It is porous, allows molecules to pass through. The cell wall basically present only in the plant cells. Cell wall is a non-living structure that surrounds the plant cell. It protects plus supports the cells. Cell wall is made up of a tough fiber called the cellulose. Here is the structure of the nucleus. Here we can see only the nucleus. So here we can see the nuclear pore, the genetic information, chromatin, the nucleolus, the dense part, the nucleoplasm, which is the liquid or the fluid present, And here we can see the dash boundary is present, that is the nuclear envelope, and between this envelope there are some pores, the spaces are present, that is known as the nuclear pore. Now another organelle is the mitochondria, which is the double membrane organelle with inner fold structure known as a cristae, and its function is the powerhouse of the cell most importantly, and it is a site of the ATP energy production through the oxidative phosphorylation. Now it is known as the powerhouse of the cell, center of respiration of the cell. They release energy for cell functions. Now another organelle is the chloroplast, that basically belongs to the plant cells only, and contains a green pigment known as the chlorophyll, which is important for photosynthesis. Here we can see the structure of the mitochondria, that is a double layer structure. Here we can see the firstly we have to see the outer membrane. This is the outer membrane, then the inner membrane, and between these membranes the spaces is present, that is known as the intermembrane space. Then here we can see that this inner layer is folded, that is known as the cristae. The folded structure is present inside of the membrane. So under this the matrix or the fluid is present. Then here we can see some ribosomes are present, granules are present, the complexes are present, which helps in the oxidative phosphorylation for the synthesis for the synthesizing of the ATP or the energy of the cell. And here we can see the ATP synthetase particles are present, or simply the ATP synthase. And here in this the DNAs are also present. Now let's move towards another organelle, that is the endoplasmic reticulum. It is a system of membranes throughout the cytoplasm. All over the cytoplasm the membranes are present. It connects the nuclear membrane to the cell membrane. From the nuclear membrane to the cell membrane this structure is present, and it is a passageway for material moving throughout the cell. It helps out in the material moving. Now here we have some types of the endoplasmic reticulum, that is the rough endoplasmic reticulum and the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Rough endoplasmic reticulum is studded with the ribosomes on its surface, involved in protein synthesis as well as the processing. A smooth endoplasmic reticulum basically lacks the presence of ribosomes on the surface, and that involved in the lipid synthesis. It is basically the most important difference between it, that it helps out in the rough endoplasmic reticulum helps out in the synthesis of proteins, while the smooth endoplasmic reticulum helps out in the synthesis of lipids. While on the rough endoplasmic reticulum ribosomes are present, whether in a smooth endoplasmic reticulum there are the lack of ribosomes in its structure. Here is the structure of it, or the image you are seeing, that here is the nucleus, and whole over it is the endoplasmic reticulum is present. Here is the ribosomes dotted structure is present, which is making the rough endoplasmic reticulum, and this is the lacking of the ribosomes on its structure. So these are the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, these dotted one is the ribosomes. So another organelle is a ribosome. What are ribosomes? Basically it is composed of rRNA, ribosomal RNA, and proteins, which exist freely in the cytoplasm or attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Its function, the sites of protein synthesis, as I told you. Now these are the tiny spherical bodies, tiny rounded bodies that helps make protein found in the cytoplasm or attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. Here you can see it is the structure of the cell. Here is the nucleus and here is the endoplasmic reticulum. And now let's move towards the another organelle, that is the Golgi bodies, which are tube-like structure that have tiny sacs, means tiny pouches are present at their ends. They help package proteins. Its structure comprises on the stack of flattened membranous sacs. Function modifies, sorts and packages proteins and lipids for storage and transport out of the cell. Here is the diagram representing the Golgi apparatus. Here we can see, here is the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, which is synthesizing the protein, as well as the lipid, the smoother one, and with it the Golgi bodies are present, which are just sorting it out and packaging it out. Now the lysosomes, which is also known as the suicide sacs, they are small structures that contain enzymes which are used in digestion. If a lysosome were to burst, it could destroy the cell. Cell organelles and their function. Now the lysosomes, which is the membrane bound vesicles containing the hydrolytic enzymes. Its function to digest worn out organelles, food particles and engulfed viruses or bacteria. Here is the structure of it. Here is the membrane of the lysosomes. then in it the enzymes are present, and here are some transport proteins are present on its surface. Now the peroxisomes, that are small membrane bound organelles containing oxidative enzymes. It breaks down fatty acids and detoxify harmful substances. Here we can see the structure of the peroxisome that contains the plasma membrane, and inside it crystalline core is present, and this layer is consists of lipid bilayer. Now the cytoskeleton. Components of cytoskeleton consist on the microfilament, intermediate filaments and the microtubules. Basically 3 structures makes the cytoskeleton, the structure for the cell. Its function is basically helps out in the maintenance of the cell shape, facilitates cell movement and anchors organelles. Now here you can see that this is the cell membrane, and here we can see several organelles such as the mitochondria, and here are some ribosomes are present, and some rough endoplasmic reticulums are present, and here we can see these greenish structure, the bluish structure and the purplish structure, which is comprising for the cytoskeleton. Greenish one is for the microtubules, and bluish one is for the intermediate filaments, and this purple one is the microfilament that is comprised of actin. Now the centrosome and centrioles. The structure of centrosome contains a pair of centrioles. Its function involved in organizing microtubules during cell division. So here in this diagram we see the centrosome, structure, function and helps out in the cell division. So here we can see in the meiosis during the anaphase stage, centrosome produces here, and here we can see the centrioles, which contains centrosome contains the centrioles in it. Cell organelles and their function. Another is the vacuole. Vacuole structure comprises on the membrane-bound sacs, larger in plant cells, smaller in the animal cells. Its function to store nutrients and waste products. In plant cell, maintain turgor pressure, water pressure maintained by the vacuoles.